read it all, you know. Somebody new comes along and gives a fresh twist. And the city in crime fiction is going through a really interesting kind of renaissance right now, in my opinion anyway. There have been so many writers, and it's great because most of them are women, that are reinventing the crime novel or adding a new twist to it. You know, Ivy Pacoda, notably, Steph Cha, so many others, Nina Ravoy. There's just lots of great writers at work today. So welcome into the crime fiction community. It's really great to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with the Poison Pen for my debut week. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. And so, as I said, I will largely kind of sit on the sidelines here and hand it over to you, Amy, and have fun.
All right. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Amy, for being here, for agreeing to speak with me.
It is my great delight and honor. I was just about to get started on your accolades. Patrick beat me to it for a few of them, but I just want to say, when I read this debut, you know, there are some debuts you just read and think, no way, there's no way this just is the first thing. This book, so just in terms of, you know, people have been talking about it a lot. It's been one of Pop Sugar's most exciting books of fall 2020. It was one of Crime Read's most anticipated crime books. And over at the Evil Empire, who shall not be named, she is an editor's pick for Best Mystery, Thriller, and Suspense. And is also, I think, currently topping the audiobook charts as of today for her genre.
For noir fiction, it was, yes.
Yeah, so congratulations on all of that. But really, I don't think any of this expresses quite the excitement and thrill that certainly I felt when I first picked up this book. The character of Joe, you know, we enter on a bar. It's very LA. It's very vibey. I have passages that I marked that I wanted to talk about, but I'm gonna first just hand it over to Hailey to read a little bit of it so that you can get a really good flavor for this really special voice. So anyway, without really further ado, let's go ahead and kick that off because I want to have a really good conversation about this book. And thank you so much for inviting me to talk about it with you, Hailey.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So I'm going to read a little bit from the very first chapter of The Lady Upstairs. So I don't think it needs any particular setup, and we can get into it from there. So I'd picked the hotel for the sting because the bar had one hell of a happy hour. If you liked your drinks cheap and strong, the glasses washed maybe once in the last week. It was down the street from the studios, the right type of place to entice a movie man to meet an obliging blonde for a quick afternoon pick-me-up. And not the least of my calculations, the St. Leo let me have my choice of adjoining rooms whenever I checked in and didn't mind early arrangements or a quick redecoration for the right price. By my second drink, the apricot-tinted windows were purpling with twilight, happening so early these days, turning the light in the bar a good soft color for sloppy bad decisions. I was waiting on my third when I saw Ellen escorting the Mark through the lobby to the elevator. She stayed cool, didn't toss me so much as a backward glance. It was harder to do than it looked. But Ellen kept her eyes firmly on the Mark's face, fingers curled around the patched elbow of his tweed blazer, a gift from one of his grandkids, no doubt, or one of the grown children benefiting from his production company's rampant nepotism. When I'd researched him for Lou and our shadowy employer, the lady upstairs, it had been one of the things that sold me. He kept his grabby sons on set, even after numerous complaints had been filed. I had read that and thought, this one's perfect. He looked at me, a swoop of terror in my stomach, but it was no more than the passing glance of a man surveying the room. I met his eyes and looked away without smiling, letting my gaze go through him. Once they got upstairs, showtime. Even on a Saturday afternoon, prime drinking hours, the bar was nearly empty. It was big business when a young couple sat down by the windows, and I watched them as I waited for the Mark to reappear, distracting myself. Her long, honey brown hair was ironed straight and scissored over her face, while his fingers plucked at the neck of his sweat-splotched shirt. They ignored each other and the fact that neither one of them was having any fun. She'd ordered something clear, vodka soda, I bet, unfussy and low calorie. See how low maintenance I am? And watched it melt all over her napkin. They hadn't slept together yet, I was positive. Perhaps tonight was the night. Another bet, Between the heat and the poor hotel accommodations and the fact that they were working hard to ignore each other, it wouldn't be a night to remember. Making up stories about strangers is not usually in my nature. Relax, Joe, would ya? Robert Jackal had said that morning, buttoning his shirt collar and steadying himself in my bathroom mirror. Eyes longer than any woman's, but that was the only thing womanly at all about that carved, handsome face. Eyes pure, no hazel green, dark hair in disarray like a sleepy boy's, crunchy between my fingers. It's not like you to be nervous. Even before the sun was up, my walls sweated little beads of condensation. I was enjoying the coolness of the pillow against my cheek, starfishing my limbs and trying to find some chill in the spot he'd left. I didn't answer him. By the time I'm done, we'll have so much footage we won't know what to do with it all, he said, then bent down to kiss me on the forehead, tapping his fingers against the bracelet he'd given me as a birthday present a few years back, a mistake he hadn't repeated since. I'd slapped his face away. As I waited, I piled my fleshless lime rinds into dimpled green pyramids, keeping the trash to mark time, how many drinks I'd had, keeping my fingers busy so I wouldn't start doing algebra about Klein's net worth on the bar top. 326 million meant he'd pay how much for photographs of his nasty predilections? What about for a video? 6 blockbusters scheduled to come out in the next year meant a reputation was worth how much exactly? 50 grand? More? My 20% of 50 grand would just about do it. Calm down, I told myself. In less than an hour, you'll have the prints. And this time tomorrow, or the day after, say, you'll have what you owe for the lady upstairs. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know why I said thank you. I mean, it's the 3 of us here on Zoom as far as I can see. I guess it was just that.
Out there. You're out there. The last Zoom call I was on, they just changed the background to a crowd, like a crowded auditorium.
There we go.
That's what we all need to do.
Amazing.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Hailey. I think, okay, so that reading, obviously it's from the front of the book. It sets up our protagonist, Joe, who is working for the mysterious, shadowy blackmail operation headed by the lady upstairs. And one thing right away you see in this excerpt that I love about this book is that although it is quite firmly putting itself in the tradition of LA Noir, it's as if it's all femme fatales from the beginning.
Yes, just all femme fatales across LA.
Yeah. And I wonder if you would just tell me a little bit about how you came to this very tasty premise and whether you love femme fatales as much as I do.
I absolutely do. I think that they have, I mean, in classic film noir, they have the best lines, they have the best wardrobe, they have the best everything. You know, there's a lot we could talk about the way that like femme fatales were categorized and written and different things, but like they are one of the main draws, I think, of the noir genre is just this like strong, interesting female archetype. But so for me, the lady upstairs, the premise kind of came to me when I moved to Los Angeles for grad school. And I had this really strong, sharp kind of angry female voice in my head for a character that I was trying to find a story to put her in, And when I moved here with such a rich noir tradition, something kind of clicked. And around the same time, I discovered Megan Abbott's Queen Pin too, which I think was such an like influence on the book. And I just love that book so much. And so it was the idea of what if you literalize the femme fatale? What if it wasn't just, you know, that she's this projection of dangerous desire and like male anxiety post World War II? What if like somebody actually had a business card that said, I destroy men for a living, get at me, you know, call me. And so when I had that kind of idea and premise, and then I had this strong voice in my head, it just felt like such a natural fit to marry them. And here we are.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so great. If you are, you know, obsessed with film noir, you see all these women who seem like they should be the protagonist. Like, wouldn't it be more interesting if they were the protagonist? But
Yes.
sort of within the framework of the story, they don't get any agency. And then I just love, you know, that's the first thing we get is Joe and this even more powerful figure in the background. So we know that's gonna come up.
Different, like it's like an MLM of female femme fatales, you know, like different levels of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you moved to LA and you get this idea, and then sort of how does it germinate? You said you were in grad school.
So my first year in grad school, I wrote about 100 pages of the novel, and I scrapped all but 10. And so my second year, then I wrote like 200 pages of the novel. I put it into high gear, and that was really kind of the first draft of this, and then ended up doing a lot of kind of revising to it. But I think part of why Los Angeles was kind of the missing ingredient moving here was that, you know, it does have such a history of noir, but what I'm really also fascinated by is that Los Angeles is both like a very real city where people make their homes, and it also is this mythological city that, like, about all the things that are set here and all the projections people have about Los Angeles. And so when I was writing this book, I kind of wanted it to travel back and forth between both places, between like real Los Angeles, like Jo's office is set in Koreatown and she lives in Playa del Rey, which is where I live, which is a part of LA that doesn't get written about a lot. And then I also wanted it to be like what people think of as Hollywood in LA, you know, the bar scene and the powerful players, and it's always kind of this like sleek look to it. So that really helped me kind of develop the book, I think, too.
Well, it has this really timeless feel to it, such that, and I think this is a real success of the book. When I read it the first time, I got so kind of swept up in it that it never even occurred to me to ask when it was taking place, which I think is a real feat in our contemporary era, because you're always thinking, well, are they going to have smartphones? Are they going to have social media? You know, how are they going to deal with this? And it did not enter my mind until the second read to even wonder. And I'll tell you what for me was the detail, and I'm so curious to ask you.
Okay.
The detail that like made it, I was like, why does this feel so timeless when they are on their phones all the time? They're calling each other, they have cell phones, it's modern. It was the pantyhose.
Yes.
Talk to me about pantyhose. All of these women are so well dressed, and they are all wearing pantyhose and stiletto heels. So,
you know, so thank you so much for that. So, and one thing that I want to bring up too is that I'm curious about this in your own work, is that I think smartphones like have made the work of the crime writer so much harder, because everything can be solved by a smartphone. So part of that was me wanting to, you know, I wanted it to be contemporary, but I also did want it to have this almost kind of throwbacky feel. And part of that, I think, was that I was immersing myself so heavily in noir, both literature and film, as I was writing this, but also was kind of from like a plot perspective of, I didn't want it to feel like, and then I went on the internet and I Google searched, and, you know, because that kind of, I don't know, for me, that's not why I turn to books. And also from a plot perspective, that solves too many questions too easily. So the pantyhose, that is so funny. I wonder if that's actually some sort of subliminal thing of like, growing up, my mom wore pantyhose. And so that's like how I see women, you know, it's like,
but that's how you know that a lady is a grown-up.
Right, exactly. But yes, and I was trying to do this kind of, you know, that they're kind of weaponizing their femininity in this way, but in part of that is becoming like almost the stereotypical like woman, you know, very dressed in stilettos and stuff. Jo is not a character who I think would naturally gravitate towards stilettos necessarily, but like they're kind of playing into the fantasy of being a woman, and so they're kind of dressing themselves in these like very kind of heteronormative female trappings too.
That's such a good answer. I love that you had that answer all ready and loaded. I was like, has anyone else asked her about the pantyhose?
No one has asked me about the pantyhose. That's great.
Yeah, it is like a subliminal thing, because as soon as you say it, as I said, I didn't notice the first time, but it just calls to mind this perfectly like a femme fatale. And you kind of trope on that a little bit. I noticed you avoid a lot of clothing descriptions that are too detailed. So you also let it buzz a little bit so you can imagine and fill in. But then at one very crucial point, you discuss the role of the anklet.
I was curious if you were going to ask about that. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You were like, so she actually rejects the anklet because she's like, it's too cliche.
So I think one of the things, I'm curious if you do this, but I think one of the things, writing a book is like such a marathon that I feel like at times I almost have to play games with myself to find ways to like, you know, not be intimidated by it. And so one of the games that I was playing with myself was like, how many noir references can I just pack in there without it being like too on the nose? And so one of the ones that I loved that was like one of my favorite ones was the one that you just mentioned, was the like, I think it's something like a woman with an anklet is always up to no good or something like that. And trying to just directly point to a Double Indemnity right there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, give us the reference. It's Barbara Stanwyck coming down the staircase, right? And
wearing the honey of an anklet, yeah.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Oh, now I'm curious about all these other Easter eggs. I want to find some.
There are plenty. There's a lot about body heat in there too.
Oh yeah, so I've been hearing people discussing body heat online as this urtext for this. I definitely caught the white dress that she wears from Body Heat, or that reminded me of Body Heat. Any other Easter eggs you can point to?
I think somewhere in the book there's a line that's kind of a paraphrase quote from Body Heat about knowledge being power. My mother always said knowledge is power. But I watch Body Heat probably once a month writing this book for 3.5 years. So I have made this my unofficial Body Heat appreciation tour.
I love it. It's an amazing movie. It's been too long since I've seen it, and I was like, oh, I don't know the references.
You've got to correct that. It's so good.
Well, I will. But yeah, I love what you say about all of that is so important. The trappings of femininity are so important in this book. And you actually have a great quote. I wish I had prepared it, but where she talks about mythology and reality in LA, and that, you know, the goal is, you know, that mythology can become real. So if you don all the trappings of the femme fatale, you know, it can become true. And that's the magic of LA, right? That's the magic of the city. I think you repeat it a couple of times. It's just lovely. The writing is so evocative and interwoven, and there's a lot of kind of the themes are woven through. You use that really voicey noir voice, but you really manage to pack a lot of kind of thematic texture into the book. So like,
thank you.
Brava again.
Thank you.
Who are your favorite? So we've mentioned Body Heat now. We've mentioned Double Indemnity. Who are your favorite femme fatale, and what are the biggest influences on this book, barring Body Heat and Megan Abbott, which you've already mentioned?
Yes, those two huge influences. You know, Raymond Chandler, obviously being in Los Angeles, and I really love him. I think he's, you know, a genius prose stylist, but I also have a couple of bones to pick with him. And I feel like some of that rage was kind of what I was writing against at times with The Lady Upstairs, which I think it can be really helpful to write against something that you're like, yeah, I don't know about that. I love Laura Lippman's Sunburn. I would like stop people in the street and read them passages of Sunburn. I love that book so much. Dorothy B. Hughes, we were talking about a little bit before this got going. James Cain, Dashiell Hammett, you know, kind of all the LA classic noirs. But like Megan Abbott, kind of everything Megan Abbott does is soaked in noir, even her more contemporary books. And like, she's just someone that I read again and again, just trying to figure out the magic of what she does. In terms of classic film noir too, one of my absolute favorites is Gilda, because that is like, I love that movie so much, and it is so bizarre. I could write a whole essay about how the ending undermines like everything that comes before it, but it kind of makes it like endlessly interesting and generative for me to watch it over and over again. Just, you know, the way that they set up the character and then totally undo it. There's also there was a noir called No Time for Tears that features just kind of an unrepentantly nasty femme fatale that I really, really loved. I watched that a bunch when I
can see her in my mind, but who is it?
I can't remember her name, unfortunately. Yeah, she had a look, it wasn't Barbara Stanwyck, but kind of had a similar thing going on. Could have looked that up ahead of time.
Someone Google it and put it in the Facebook comments, please.
Yeah, there we go. Someone can figure it out.
I'm gonna kick myself when it happens. Yeah, that is an amazing film.
And she's just so like unrepentant about it. You love to see it.
Elizabeth something?
Yes. Elizabeth.
It's coming.
We'll figure it out.
So you said the word rage, so let's talk a little bit about rage, shall we?
Let's do it.
Yeah, so this is a noir that focuses on the agency. The specific task of this agency is to go after sort of repellent Hollywood men, right, and blackmail them. And it's not all women in the agency, but it's run by a woman, and it's, you know, it's sex work. It's a honey trap, honey pot.
Honey pot brothel.
Yeah. So yeah, tell us a little bit about kind of where that came from. Is there rage in the book? And if so, kind of how does that affect how all the characters are?
Yeah, that's there's definitely rage in the book. You know, kind of the two main female characters are Jo, who's our narrator, and then Lou, who's her best friend and who's her co-worker and kind of got her involved in this work. Kind of found Jo at a low moment when she had been badly treated by a man, and helps her kind of use that sadness, turn that sadness into rage, and to use it as fuel. And I think that there are kind of two different looks at female rage. Like Jo wears hers much more on the surface and is kind of more unapologetic about it. It's like this armor that she's built for herself. Whereas Lou, I think, is kind of the more on the surface, she's kind of more vibrant and friendly and bubbly, but is driven by something kind of like even darker and stronger than Jo, and just kind of sublimates it, which I think is can be true of a lot of us. I was just rewatching over the weekend Alias Grace, the limited mini series based on the Margaret Atwood novel, and I think that that is such an interesting take on female rage, and the way that it can just, like, you know, this character had been badly treated her whole life, and it just turned into this kind of dark thing inside of her that she was able to not show a lot of people until she did. And so some of that with the book was just kind of this like really frustration at the like inequities that women face. And, you know, one thing, I don't know if this is a question that you have coming up, but like one thing that I've talked about a lot with this book has been its relation to the Me Too movement. And I actually started writing it before the Harvey Weinstein news broke, which the Me Too movement I know is older, but like that's the perniciousness of it, right? Is that like there were already rumors about the casting couch king. There were already all these stories of the ways that women get harassed and all these different things. And so the agency, the kind of look at it is like, what if you could fight back? And I don't know that fighting back in this way is the right way to do it, but it's one way that it's the way that these characters are choosing to do it.
Yeah. Well, speaking as a person who has written a revenge thriller that
yes.
is also constantly being asked about the Me Too movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I have noticed in my reviews, Goodreads reviews and such, is that also, we love you. To preface this, always write Goodreads reviews, even really bad ones.
Yes, please.
Write them always. But yeah, there's a lot of, mostly men, not all men, but there's a lot of men who do not care for these types of narratives, I have noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And we were sort of joking earlier today about the reviews where people kind of go on about the unlikability of these female characters. They're always, I mean, unlikable, it's such a trope that there's a podcast, an amazing podcast that Lane Fargo and Wendy Hurd run about it. And yeah, it's just something that's hurled at women all the time. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if, this is a book, your book, it's not that the female characters are meant to be virtuous. I don't think there's any way where, you're condoning message. And in fact, I was really interested in that you also depict women in these circumstances preying on other women. There's a way in which it is like an MLM or a pyramid scheme, right?
Yeah.
They're roping in other women to do this sex work that, under somewhat false pretenses. So, that's one of my favorite parts of the book. I mean, to me, I'm not looking for these women who punish men to be paragons of virtue, and
they're not.
They do, right?
Right.
And I just wonder, I mean, it's such an old saw of a question. I hate to throw it at you, but I can't avoid it in this instance. Why are unlikable female characters so likable? Why are they so, amazing? especially in the hands of someone like yourself who's doing it very complexly.
Thank you. Well, I'm also very curious about your answer to that too, because you're right. Last Woman Standing is very much like a female-driven rage revenge thriller, and I love that book I just devoured. I think for me, yeah, I mean, there's no part of me that thinks that Jo is not complicit in also using other women like she is. And I'm not trying to write a book that's like, this is the feminist way, this is it, this is the right thing to do. But for me, what makes them so unlikable is like, Jo gets to just kind of live life at like going 90 miles per hour, in this way that I definitely don't get to myself or would want to necessarily. But it's almost like it's like you get to channel something that you don't get to tap in everyday life. And I think that can be really fun as a reader too. I think if you're coming to it for a morality tale, you're not going to be thrilled. And if that's what you need of characters, there are plenty of great characters out there like that, but that's not really what we have here. And yeah, I think it can just be really fun to kind of live in the space of somebody who's giving herself permission that society is not going to give her to live at whatever volume she wants to.
Yeah, I mean, you just wonder about these people of all genders. No one in particular.
No.
Whether they go onto the Goodreads page for like, Double Indemnity or some for James King or Chandler, and they're like, this character is very, his motivations are highly suspect. I'm not sure he's a good person,
No, those characters get to be complex. We call those characters complex. We call the female characters unlikable.
Right.
Which yeah. I think I went to a BoucherCon panel where somebody asked, people always ask that question, are you worried about your characters being likable or unlikable? And I think your answer, as I recall, was such a good one. It stuck with me, where you said, likable to whom? Like, as if there's some sort of like one flavor of what is likable. There's like there's a spectrum of behavior, but it's crazy to imagine that there's like one benchmark you can hit and then you're just likable to everyone. This
is really good for me to be hearing, by the way. This is awesome. Just to jump in real quickly, one of the things that I've noticed have you guys noticed that really condescending trend in literature in general, but in crime fiction, where the man will be referred to by his last name and the woman will be referred to by her first name?
Yeah.
Throughout the narrative, and you still see that a lot. It's crazy. I also like that you mentioned in the notes to the book, Vicki Hendricks' kind of groundbreaking novel, really, Miami Purity.
Thank you for mentioning it. I should have mentioned that earlier. It's one of my favorite books. It's so amazing.
Yeah, she's an old friend. I've known her for a long time. Yeah, great book, great writer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she actually was the first one to send me a blurb for my book.
Oh, really?
Just burst into tears that day. I got it. I was just like, oh, Vicki Hendricks liked my book.
Last time she was out here, she's an avid bird watcher, or at least she was. And so she was out in Arizona bird watching. It's a great state for it.
Wonderful.
Not to hijack your conversation, but one thing I wanted to bring up, and Amy chime in too, is there is the classic tradition in noir fiction of that one final score, and then I'm going to go straight,
right?
And Jo, in some ways she owes her soul to the company store, and so. It's that noir downward cycle of, desperation, frustration, all those different things. And then they lead to, in so many of these books and films, a really bad decision. And then it's like, this is not going to work out. But part of it's, and you can really see why the French loved this particular art form, it coming, the classic noir fiction and film kind of dovetailing with the whole existentialist movement, and a lot of these questions coming into play. So talk about how that kind of works in your book, this sort of the last sting.
The last sting. Yeah, so when the book opens, Joe, as you saw, is kind of in the midst of this big sting operation targeting a lecherous Hollywood producer whose name is Hiram Klein, who's kind of like a more or less Harvey Weinstein stand-in, not directly, but like that's a little bit at the casting couch king. And she, her girl Ellen, who's charged with kind of seducing him and then providing the blackmail material, is starting to get a little squirrely. Things aren't working out super well. The deal is kind of going wrong. And that's not good for Joe for a couple of reasons. Their boss is not the most understanding person in the world. And also she owes her boss a great deal of money. And this case is going to be the one that kind of finally clears her debt. If she gets this done, then she's free and clear and she can kind of make her own decisions about the agency as she will. And so of course things start to go wrong, which of course leads to one bad decision, which of course leads to another. And so eventually leads Joe into a place where she kind of has to pull off an operation, a big operation, the final sting. And then you have to get out because their boss is not going to be happy with her no matter what she does at this point. So I think, yeah, noir is fun and horrible to write if you like your characters, because it's just every decision has to get darker and make their life worse. And I really like Joe. But it was about making her life as terrible as I could by the end of the book, you know, just piling more and more on there.
That was so well done. It's like the way the stakes raise in this book, it's like from chapter 1 to chapter 2 to chapter 3, it's almost like a number that just keeps doubling, you know. I mean, it's just exponentially raised stakes until you're so upset and confused. and then the ending is, I mean, I should say I am not a I don't really write, you know, noir. I think I have noirish influences like many people, but I was so impressed with the plotting in this book and how much like a Chandler novel it felt, even to the point of being a little disorienting and dreamlike at times, you know, those little subtle heightening touches that you put throughout, such as the pantyhose, but also lots of other things, like contribute to this aura so that by the time all the twists are, you know, over, you feel like Joe, you know, you really feel trapped in this web. And then the way you conclude it is like, oh, so perfect. You think, could this possibly end? It's a killer ending. Like, hats off to you. Endings are hard.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, just wonderful stuff. And as a professional, I gotta ask you, how do you do your plotting? Like, what kind of outline? No outlining?
So I didn't outline the first several versions of this book, which was probably a mistake. And there's kind of the big midpoint turn of the book, you know, which I wouldn't necessarily call a twist, but it's the big event that happens at the midpoint that shapes the second half of the book. Something I just kind of randomly decided at one day was like, I was in the middle of that scene and I knew I was in the scene and I had to make a big decision about where the characters were going to go. And I said, well, what if they did this? And I did it. And then I had to figure out the rest of the book. And I would not recommend that. That was very hard. So I used the Save the Cat Writes a Novel framework and kind of put it over drafts to figure out how to heighten it. I also one time had a professor in grad school give me the advice, which you probably already instinctively know this or already have heard it, but like it was revolutionary to me, which was solve your problems in reverse order of how important they are to your plot. So save the biggest one for last and then solve backwards from there. And that was really helpful to kind of, because I did have a lot of kind of different narrative strands going of different things. And then it was helpful to be able to say like, okay, this is the biggest one. Here's the second biggest one. And then you had to solve them in reverse order of that.
I just wrote that down. That's super helpful.
Yes.
Yeah, completely fascinating. And like, I think, so the way that these things undo, I mean, there's so much going on. As a person who only knows about revealing layers of, you know, trauma, I was kind of impressed. You know, you have all these sex workers, and what you don't do actually is go back and peel away their trauma and sort of look at their fundamentals. And I really admired that. I like both kinds of books, but I really admired how, you know, we always knew where the pulse of the book was emotionally and what the emotional stakes were, but without kind of picking at these you know, these women, just like sort of letting them just be agents in the world, some more effective than others, some with magic bad luck. Yeah, I just thought it was so so well done that way.
Thank you. That was definitely something that I, you know, early versions of the book, I think I got notes from people of all genders about how, you know, maybe there should be kind of a traumatic thing in Joe or Lou's backstory that was really what caused them. But for sex work in particular, I think that is like too often the trope, and I didn't really want to lean on that. That doesn't mean that it's not true or it can't be effectively done, but that wasn't really where I wanted my characters to go. I didn't want there to be like an if-then situation, like, you know, if she had experienced sexual violence, then this is why she does this. That wasn't really what I wanted it to be. So in Lou's case in particular, I kind of left that a blank slate open to interpretation of like, why does she do this? And I that was definitely deliberate.
Lou is my favorite character, by the way. I love Joe, but I'm like obsessed with Lou, and I was from the beginning. I mean, regardless of how things play out. And there was one paragraph I was kind of hoping to read because I screenshotted it earlier for Twitter, because it was just like, whenever I hit this paragraph, I'm like, oh God, this is the book I'm in. And it's where we see Lou for the first time and through Joe's eyes. So is it okay if I read just one paragraph?
I would love that. I'd love to hear you.
It's from chapter 2, so it's very early on. And she goes into another bar. FYI, it's a different bar. Here's my idea of a good bar: a clean, ill-lighted space. No pink drinks, no hula statuettes, certainly no dangling stuffed parrots strangled by fairy lights. But this bar had Lou. She looked up, smiled. The drink in front of her was so orange it glowed, turning the underside of her chin the color of a sunrise. It looked like the sort of drink that made you hug strangers before you hugged a toilet. And it's just, I love that paragraph so much. I think it's one of the best intros of a character that I've seen, because it gives you all of that glow, and the way Joe looks at Lou, you know, throughout the book. She's just surrounded by this halo of, but then it's like it ends in the toilet. It's not to say that maybe there's a little bit of foreshadowing there, but I love the contrasts in that paragraph, and the way it sets a mood, and the way it plays with that idea of plasticity, of, you know, fakeness and artifice. And it really, like, right up front, you're like, oh, Lou is a person who loves artifice. Like, she bathes in it. Yeah. Again,
Thank you.
I'm talking about the writing. I'm sorry. That's what I love.
Can I jump in for a second? Just to read a sentence or two. It's right around the same point, but it says, I gripped the edge of the table trying to think. The ancient mariner of a waitress popped her head over Lou's shoulder to check on her drinks. Neither of us said anything. Eventually she got the memo and moved on. I love that, the ancient mariner of a waitress. And you know, what's so fun about this is that all these little nods remind me very much of Raymond Chandler, you know, because he was the absolute master of, in just one little metaphor, you know, describing a whole world. You know, I mean, in The Long Goodbye, it's full of it, you know, the way it begins. And so it was fun seeing that style.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We could just like literally read lines from this book all night, guys. This is what is so fun about this book. It's just end to end lines like that. And it doesn't ever come across as pastiche, because I think it's doing something really different from Chandler, as Hailey's saying. But anyway, well, I'll hand it back to you instead of just reading line after line. But you did write this. You were in a master's program, right? When you wrote it, but then when you came out of the master's program, was it all ready to go? Was it, like, you know, and then you got your agent and everything happened? And
it was not. What I came out of the master's program with was like a very complete first draft that had Joe's really strong voice. It had all the characters kind of in the right place and the concept for the book in the right place, but the plot didn't really build in the right way. And so I actually, I did some revision work by myself, and then I started querying agents I queried our joint agent, Sharon Pelletier, who wrote me back like the nicest like pass essentially, but she wrote back like 8 paragraphs of feedback, which was like more than I had gotten from anybody. You know, too often it's, which I totally understand. Agents are very busy, but a lot of the time it is kind of this like, not right for me. And that's totally valid, but it's nothing that like, I can't change anything based on that. So Sharon's feedback led me to Pitch Wars, which is an online mentoring program that happens every year where you pair established writers with upcoming writers, and you have like 3 to 4 months basically to like sprint workshop your book in time for an agent showcase. And so in 2018, I submitted to Pitch Wars, and I submitted to Lane Fargo, who is also another one of our agent sisters, is the author of the feminist thrillers Temper and They Never Learn.
Excellent.
Yes, and she picked me out of kind of the slush pile and worked with me, and we basically totally overhauled my plot in those 3 to 4 months. And then at the end of that, I was in the agent showcase, and I ended up signing with Sharon. And Sharon was nice enough to do like a little thread about her side of that experience yesterday on Twitter, which was so nice.
It's so cute. Yes, Sharon goes into detail on Twitter in a thread today that you can put in the link in the comments.
Yes, there we go.
About how the second she passed, she was like, oh, why did I do that? Why did I do that? And how she basically stalked you for the whole Pitch Wars process and low-key bribing Lane to reel you in.
There was no bribery needed. I was definitely stalking her back. Sharon is like my dream agent to work with. She's amazing. So when I signed with her, then we did more revision and a lot more work on kind of like the stakes. And then we sold my book to Putnam and we did more revision. And I think that's the part that I was most shocked by, was how much revision would actually go into this book. All books, I think. It was just wonderful. And I'm so thrilled with where we got it to based on all that revision. But if you had told me 3 years ago that that was coming, I would have been like, I don't think that's true.
You know, it's funny, Hailey, I just wanted to bring up quickly, when you guys were talking a few minutes ago, I was reminded, I recently saw that documentary about, Jeffrey Epstein, and that,
Yes.
kind of the ultimate sleazebag predator.
Mm-hmm.
But, he would have these young women who would essentially solicit other young girls. And when you're talking about, what Joe does here, I mean, it's not quite that bad, but I really like how you, as Amy was saying, how you unapologetically put that in there, and it reminded me of, you guys know the Scottish crime writer Denise Mina?
Yeah.
Brilliant writer. Her new book deals a lot with sex workers in Glasgow.
Mm-hmm.
And she writes a lot about that. It's like, we're poor, we were poor. This is our motivation.
Right.
It wasn't necessarily that we had daddy issues, or, going and unpacking all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was, it gave us money. We needed the money. Just a brilliant, her new book is called The Less Dead.
Mm-hmm.
She deals with sex workers. We haven't talked at all, I don't think yet, about Ellen, who's a very interesting character. And can you talk a little bit about her?
Sure. So Ellen is the young woman that Joe has recruited to seduce and then betray and blackmail Hiram Klein. And Ellen, if we think of the job as kind of like an MLM, Ellen's on the bottom rank, and she kind of weirdly looks up to Joe as she has this kind of confrontational relationship with her. As the book opens, this isn't really a spoiler, this is kind of the first chapter, Ellen is kind of starting to like question, why am I doing this? This sounded like a fun adventure, and now it's just kind of not as fun, and it's kind of horrible, and I don't really want to do this. And so she's having kind of this like attack of conscience that Joe is a problem for Joe. It's a problem for Joe in terms of the money that she owes to the lady upstairs, but I think it's also a problem for Joe because Ellen's attacks of conscience kind of bring out something in Joe that she doesn't really want to look at. She doesn't really want to look at the human cost of what she's doing. And I really enjoyed writing Ellen. I think partially because Joe is looking at her, there's so much irritation in the way that Joe looks at Ellen that was really fun for me to write, to kind of like play on all those tropes. And if we're talking about unlikable female characters, when I was actually workshopping early versions of this, the men found Joe unlikable more than the women did who were reading it. And the women found Ellen unlikable more than the men did who were reading it. And so it was an interesting thing for me to look at. That's like broad strokes. I don't think that that's necessarily true across the board, but I think that like there's different types of likability and who resonates with who. And so Ellen is kind of more the traditional, has more morals part of this organization, which
and less power.
And less power, right? And so she makes her more vulnerable in this way too.
What about Robert Jackal?
He's another favorite of mine.
Yeah.
You know, what's funny is that very early when I was first writing this, I kind of just wanted him to be like a male bimbo, because I was kind of my little like revenge to, you know, all the female characters that are just kind of the stock love interest in crime novels and in classic noir. But as I got more in depth with him, I kind of enjoyed turning the tables with that, again, because the book is so firmly entrenched in Joe's point of view. Joe has the certain look of him where he kind of is, in her mind, this male bimbo. And then I think as the book goes on, you start to see ways in which he is a lot more perceptive than Joe is giving him credit for, or that Joe actually wants to believe about him. Like, she doesn't want to think of him as this more complicated character than the way that she sees him.
So he's not like a Cato Kalin with a camera.
He is not quite a Cato Kalin with a camera, no.
No, you can't write a flat character even when you try. This is the lesson here.
That's very sweet. Thank you.
Guys, we're coming in we got about 10 minutes or so left. And
there's questions I just wanted to get in.
Absolutely, of course. And I wanted to ask you
if anyone else has questions that they're putting in the comments, definitely those two. They're two really short ones. I ask everybody, what did you learn from this process of your debut novel? And what are you working on next? That's all.
What did I learn from the process of the debut novel? I think I learned the importance of community. I think I knew that, but I mean, it just is so amazing and terrifying and wonderful and scary all at the same time. And so to have friends who have done it before you, who can kind of show you the ropes, who can like be like, no, that's normal, what has been crazy helpful. And I feel so grateful to be part of like such a loving, vibrant crime writing community. And I am working on a second book, and the more I talk about it, the more I have to work on it. So it's another feminist noir set in Los Angeles about a woman who runs a murder bus tour. And one day on one of her tour stops, she finds a dead body, and the dead body is actually connected to the unsolved murder of her sister years ago. So that's my next one.
Love it.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
Hey, Amy, can you talk a little, I wanted to ask you before we go away, a little bit about the sordid underworld of stand-up comedy. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the research you did with the Last Woman Standing?
Yes, I will say that it stopped just short of me actually doing stand-up. I know. The thing is, by the time I was in a point where doing stand-up would have helped, I was massively pregnant. And I thought this could be the best thing ever, because no one's gonna like throw tomatoes at a pregnant woman. But I just couldn't quite. I was like, my back hurts. I don't want to have to do this. But I did know a lot of, I'm kind of part of, or adjacent to a comedy world. My husband is a comic, and lots of our friends are actual stand-ups. My husband is not. And so I have had a little bit of insight. And in fact, Last Woman Standing, there's a part of it that takes place in LA. I wanted to ask Hailey, and I'm always afraid to, but I wanted to ask Hailey if there's anything about the LA parts that feels even remotely real.
I really did feel like, you know, what was funny is that I kind of knew exactly the neighborhood. If I recall, I can't remember if you say it specifically or if I just put it on it. It's kind of like Palms area of LA, and it just, I felt like I could picture the exact street they were walking down when she was meeting up with, Jason.
Okay, yeah. Oh God, I can't believe you remember. Yes.
Jason, and they're going, I think, to like a diner or something. And I just had this like very clear picture of LA. So it felt very real to me.
I love it. Living in Austin as I do, there's a kind of a pipeline between LA and Austin and Chicago and New York as well. But for some reason, you know, because of Austin's movie kind of connection, there's a lot of filmmaking here. There used to be more, but there is kind of an LA Austin connection. And so people move away when they're kind of getting big or they're trying to get big, and they would go and try and hack it out and then come back 4 or 5 years later, or not come back. Some of them are out there killing it. But so as a result, you know, my connection to this world of comedy, while virtually nil from my own perspective, I have seen and heard a lot of these stories, and in fact was kind of part of a Facebook group for a long time that was Women in Comedy. There was kind of a secret Facebook group for women in comedy to just talk amongst themselves about what goes on in that world. And, you know, as it turns out, a lot of what goes on in that world is like Louis C.K. type stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so before, I mean, when I wrote that book, everyone was like, "Oh, that's Louis C.K., your character in that novel." And I honestly, it was influenced by the rumors about him, but in fact, that story had not broken when I wrote the book. And in fact, it looked like it never would. Much like Harvey Weinstein, it was an open secret in the community. Everybody knew about it, and there were other male comics doing it, you know, similar things, but just there, we had sort of internalized this idea that no matter how much you talk about it, it's just never going to go away. And my impetus for writing Last Woman Standing was partly from that frustration of seeing those conversations play out again and again and again. You know, like, what if someone just was like, let's just take them out, you know? And then the media like explosion happened. A few of them got sort of taken out, but not many and not for long. But yeah, that's why I wrote about stand-up, not because I am funny in the least.
I think you're funny.
You know who I love is Maria Bamford.
Oh yeah.
I think she's just a brilliant woman.
I've seen her a couple of times in Austin, and when she has been through, and yeah, she's like the best ever.
She really is.
Can you give us a little taste, Amy, of what Bad Habits is about?
Oh, sure, I will really quickly, but I want to circle back to Hailey's book. But yes, Bad Habits is another I think feminist novel of suspense. Set in a toxic graduate school program. It concerns Mac, a poor kid from the wrong side of the tracks who's spent her whole life kind of trying to follow her Tony, rich best friend that she sort of accidentally meets, and ends up in this graduate program where they are preyed on by a pair of toxic professors, and things get very strange after that. So look for Bad Habits, February 2nd. Pre-order it from Poison Pen. They will ship it to you.
Oh, I cannot wait.
I do have a couple of questions, actually, Hailey. One of them, a couple of them are ones that you get a lot. Have you sold the movie or TV rights to this book yet?
So I'm technically not allowed to divulge anything particular, but there are things happening. Super vague and unsatisfying, but I am not really actually supposed to say. So
for now, it's just running in our
between
mind.
the lines. Yeah, exactly.
Well, as kind of a corollary to that, any casting, if you had your dream cast for some of the main players, who would you pick?
You know, I am actually super terrible at doing dream casting type stuff. There are people who are really good at it. You know, I would need Joe to be somebody who had kind of a lot of spunk in life and kind of almost like maybe a Jennifer Lawrence type a little bit, you know, this kind of ability to say something sharp, but also have this vulnerability underneath. But I don't know. I would be curious if other people read the book and have thoughts about that. I'm always open to that. I didn't have anyone particular in mind.
A bunch of good unknown talent would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Other question, just we were talking a little bit about sex workers. Any research that you had to do to kind of get into that world at all, and how dark did you have to go?
You know, not super dark. I did do a little bit of research. I actually am lucky enough to know some people who have either been involved in sex work or know people who have. And so I kind of have firsthand sources that I can talk to. What's interesting is that for the agency itself, one of the things that I kind of modeled it on is that there is this agency in China where if a woman suspects, and it's not directly parallel, but it was fascinating, and I kind of went on a deep dive about this, but if a woman suspects that her husband is cheating on her, she can hire this service who will actually befriend the mistress and kind of offer her something in her life to take the place of the husband, whether it's a different boyfriend or a different job that takes her out of town, or like she needs a hobby, like which is like a thing to say. But basically, this agency kind of finds something that like replaces whatever he was filling in her life. And I read about that in The Cut, I think, and I was just like so fascinated by that. I went into a deep dive, and it's not quite a parallel to what my characters do, but it's kind of similar in a way. And so that was kind of a fascinating thing that my research turned up.
Another question is about LA. Your first draft, did I mishear you? But was it not set in Los Angeles? It was set somewhere else?
Oh no, it was always set in Los Angeles.
Always in LA.
Los Angeles was kind of, the missing piece. When I moved here, it was the thing that influenced it to become a noir, the book.
I gotcha. Right. Let me see here.
Still reeling from the idea of a TV show or movie. I just want it to be a TV show so that it'll last longer, frankly, right. As I was reading it.
I think it could be a very cool TV show if someone were perhaps trying to make that happen.
Well, do you have...
Yeah.
Actually, this is a question for both of you guys before we wrap it up. There are a lot of people watching, but I think they're just enjoying the conversation. Hailey, it's a lot of people talk about writing a novel and never actually do it, and never pull it off. So congratulations to realizing your dream.
Thank you.
And finishing it and getting it, What advice do you have? And then I'll ask Amy the same question for people who want to write, aspiring writers.
I think that there really is no way around the painful bits of writing. And that's like a lesson that I'm having to relearn over and over and over again. So if you want to write because you think it's always going to feel magical and like inspired, then I think the book will never get written. I think you have to force yourself to sit in the seat and turn out words that really make you cringe and reread those words and be like, I can't ever do this, and just keep doing it anyway. And that's how a book gets written. And unfortunately, I keep hoping there will be a shortcut for book 2, and there really doesn't seem to be, unfortunately.
I hear you, girl. There's not one for book 4 either. I'm working on it right now. It's like, what? I have to figure this out again and write it?
Right?
Crazy.
It doesn't seem like it should be like that.
I know. You just keep thinking you're going to learn, and you do learn more, but then you just, I think your expectations for each book change and grow. Every time you learn something, you just try to do something new. That's much harder.
Yes.
But yeah, I actually always want to throw in there, Hailey, you mentioned earlier community and what you learned about the writing community. And I would say one of my biggest pieces of advice for people is just don't underestimate that. You are going to spend enough time alone in this process, like looking into your soul on the page. A thing that is sustaining through those like incredibly hard months and years is, you're like, a writing group is kind of my first recommendation for people. I've had a writing group. I've been in one for 7-8 years now. And Good as Gone was pretty much written in that group. And we meet every week. We're actually meeting tonight as soon as I get off the phone or the Zoom. And it just is like having feedback, yes, but also kind of cheerleading, support, group therapy for your novel. A novel is just a long haul, and it's really helpful to, rather than having to flag down people and try to get them to, your spouse or whatever, try to get them to read drafts over and over again, having a mutually sustaining relationship with other writers, it will teach you so much. It'll teach you, I think, as much as, maybe even being in a program, a writing
Mm-hmm.
program, in a different way.
Definitely.
Yeah, or at least for me, I had tried to write a novel right out of undergrad, actually. And I decided to move to an isolated spot where I knew no one, because I figured that I would just write. And I did write, but I burned out.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was mature enough really to see the value of pursuing those relationships. And now it's easier than ever. There's a lot of more social media. It can feel a little overwhelming, but yeah, that's what I always say. Just don't be afraid to kind of lurk in writing groups. Find your writing family. They don't have to be writing the same genre as you, or even at the same level. There can be all different levels in a group. Just find that team that will help you get through that experience.
Does it ever get ugly in your writing group?
I mean,
Egos
people die. People are murdered frequently, but only on page so far.
Bruised
So far.
egos and all that kind of thing.
Oh, that's one thing that's so great about it. I actually have always wanted to have more workshop experience. Like, I haven't taken many writing classes, but I have to say, from the limited experience I have, the advantage of a group that meets over time with a novel is that you develop relationships with them and trust. So we do actually tell each other exactly what we think, but we know each other and we trust each other, and we're vulnerable with each other, but and tender when we need to be. And it just ends up becoming a really sustaining relationship that makes everyone's writing better in my experience. So yeah.
Has either of you participated in one of those like writing, what would you call it, a writing retreat? Like you think about Yaddo or some of these famous writing colonies or something.
Nothing formal like that. No. I've done my own writing retreats where I back when we could travel, I'd go to Palm Springs for a weekend and try to bang out as much as I could, but nothing formal like that. It'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Same.
Well, ladies, it's been a great hour. Thanks so much for taking time out to talk with us today. Congratulations so again, Hailey, on the publication of your terrific new book.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Buy it, go to the buy link, go to poisonedpen.com and order them.
We got some Amy Gentry product here too. So again, thanks so much, guys. And
thank you.
Look forward to catching up with you again real soon, both of you.
Absolutely. Awesome.
It's
so nice to meet you. Congratulations again, Hailey. Have a great
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Good night, guys.
Good night.
There we go. All right, so Facebook's done.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, Hailey.
That was a lot of fun. Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Yeah.
That was really great.
Do you have a whole bunch of other ones set up?
I'm doing another event tomorrow night. I'm doing some stuff on social media, like Instagram Lives and Facebook Live type stuff. I have another book event in December, and then maybe another one after that. And then we've had a few, I've basically had events, I think, going since Tuesday. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're zoomed out.
But it's so fun to get to talk to people about my book and to, talk to people like Amy Gentry, who I just totally idolize. And last night I was in conversation with Elizabeth Little, and it's been really lovely.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you know Ivy Pacoda, who's there in LA?
I actually did an event with Ivy Pacoda a few months ago. And after the event, she emailed me and was like, let's grab a drink when we can grab drinks again. And I was like, I'm going to print this and put it on my wall because she's so talented. She's so great.
Yeah, she's very, very cool.
Yeah. And Steph Chaw is fabulous too. I know her a little bit. And she's just so smart and such a great writer.
And I don't think we've seen the best out of her yet too. I mean, I think she's going to mature into some just incredible stuff.
Totally. Yeah. I agree.
All right. Well, you have a great night, and raise a toast to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Patrick. This was so lovely.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.